So the Nintendo Switch 2 has been out for a month now, and I think it's time to do a full review and my first impressions of the Nintendo Switch 2 after owning it for a month. So if you want to know, just keep watching this video. So the first things first is of course the new design of the Nintendo Switch 2. The Switch 2 looks and feels more premium than its predecessor, with its new LCD screen, its Joy-Cons, and of course its size as well. The Switch 2 of course has a 7.9-inch screen, which compared to the original is 6.2, so there is quite a big difference between owning the original and the Nintendo Switch 2. So of course the Nintendo Switch 2, it didn't come with the OLED screen, which I know a lot of people were disappointed in. However, I feel like Nintendo has not slacked on this, because the screen is still vibrant and colours look sharp and crisp when you're playing, and I feel like Nintendo never slacked on the screen, even though it doesn't have the OLED part of it. So now that the Nintendo Switch 2 does play in 4K when it is docked, it is very crisp and clear and colours look absolutely beautiful. However, it is a shame that they didn't release more games that had this option. The older games do not have the compatibility, whereas some of the new ones do, but there is very little of the games that have been released with the new Nintendo Switch 2. So the only game that I did manage to try this in is obviously Mario Kart World, which again I absolutely love, and the colours and everything about the graphics on this look beautiful. With that being said, I feel like the screen has been absolutely beautiful. There has been a lot of difference between the original and the Nintendo Switch 2. Now obviously if you'd have had the OLED screen and comparing it to the Nintendo Switch 2, you might not see a lot of difference, and I know that a lot of people have said, why did they not put an OLED screen on it? I think the reason why they didn't put an OLED screen on it is because it would have bumped the price up even higher, and it would have made it a little bit more expensive than it already was. Now hopefully in the future they might do it again, which they did with the Nintendo Switch 1, the original one. They brought out an OLED version of that one, so maybe they'll do that with the Nintendo Switch 2. But I feel like the screen has been absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with it, and I feel like the colours are very bright, crisp and vibrant, and I just love it. I love the screen of this, and it's very nice compared to the original one. Now still sticking with the design, you will notice that the back of the Nintendo Switch 2 has a redesigned kickstand. Now this one I have found that it's so much easier to play in tabletop mode rather than the little plastic flimsy one that used to be on the original Switch. Now with this one, this kickstand goes across all of the device rather than just on one side, which to me I feel like is easier, and I feel like it's a bit more supported when you are playing in tabletop mode. A lot of people have said that this might snap as well, but I feel like this one is built a little bit more sturdier than the previous one. So if you've not watched one of my other videos comparing the Nintendo Switch 2 and the Nintendo Switch 1, then you would have known that, then you won't know that when I was filming it, the first one did actually snap straight off in my hands, whereas obviously this one didn't. Of course the Nintendo Switch 2 is all in black, and I feel like that makes it look a bit more premium and a bit more expensive, and the weight of it and the feel of it also helps with that as well. So comparing it to the Nintendo Switch 1 and Nintendo Switch 2, this one just feels like a more expensive console, which obviously it is when it first came out, but it just has that premium feel to it, which I absolutely love. I have noticed though, if you are playing like this with your Nintendo Switch 2, that it does have a little bit of fingerprint marking on it, but if you get a case and you just wipe it over frequently, then that problem can be eliminated. However, it's not much of an issue to the point where I think it is a fingerprint magnet like the DS was. So if anybody used to play a DS and you know the black one, that used to be a fingerprint magnet. This one doesn't have that same effect, but you can still see a little bit of marks on it, but wiping it away, it'll be easily gone. Now let's move on to the Joy-Cons. Of course the Nintendo Switch 2 has the magnetic sides instead of the slide-on sides. Now I do feel like this one is a little bit better made. Now I know there's been a lot of controversy about the magnetic on it and whether it's going to snap in the end, because as you pull the switch off, the Joy-Con off, you have the little connector which is here, which a lot of people have said that could snap, which it could in time, but if you look after it, it might not do. This is the Joy-Cons now on the Switch 2. As you can see, they've got a bit more of a curve to them, and you've got bigger buttons at the side, which is so much easier to play with. Now the previous Joy-Cons did have the very small buttons, whereas now they have the larger buttons when you're playing in that mode, and it's just so much easier to press them instead of having to dig your nail to push it. And of course this is the design of the Joy-Cons, like I say, that you have the minimalist of colour on them, which I do kind of miss from the Switch 1, and I wish that they would brought out the colours again, but maybe they'll bring that out in the future, who knows. But to me, I just feel like it just looks a bit more premium and there's not so much colour on them. But I also like the fact that they've muted the red, so it's not so vibrant, it's just more of a peachy colour rather than a red. And they do feel a little bit more premium than the previous ones. They don't feel so plasticky and so tacky, whereas these ones have more of a smooth sort of finish to them, and they do feel and better when you're holding them in your hand. The one thing I have noticed with the new Joy-Cons is the fact that when they are connected to the console, they do have an ever so slight bend to them. So if you are playing like this, you can bend it ever so slightly, but I think the reason to that is because of the magnets that's inside. So obviously as you pull it off, you only have the magnet that is connecting here, and it doesn't have it up here. If they had like 3 magnets up here, it probably would have eliminated the fact that it bent. But who is really going to bend constantly when you're playing it? I don't know, but that's one thing to know. So with the left Joy-Con, as you know, if you do own a previous model of the Nintendo Switch 2, then they had a lot of drift issues. Now I haven't noticed it yet, and hopefully I won't ever notice it, but it does feel a little bit more premium and a little bit better to move around. However, if you are constantly playing on it, you're going to have that drift, because that is the stick that you use the most when you're moving your characters around. So I don't know if any other consoles have this problem, but Nintendo definitely have this problem. But time will only tell on whether this will carry on with the Nintendo Switch 2. Hopefully it doesn't, but who knows. So of course the Joy-Cons are now compatible as a mouse. Now if you have the attachments, you can put it on and use it as a mouse. Now I haven't really tried this out because there's not many games that have that option, but I feel like I don't really need to, because who is going to really use the mouse option? So I feel like it was kind of pointless for Nintendo to put that on, but the option is there. I don't know what other games they're going to bring out to have that option to do it with, but personally if you are using your Nintendo Joy-Cons as a mouse, then you might as well get a computer and play games with a computer instead, because the mouse is just a bit pointless for me personally. But I can't really comment on it, like I say, because I haven't used it, but there's the option as well, which is maybe it's a nice addition, I don't know, but again there's not a lot of games that are compatible with it yet, so I can't really test it out fully. I've also found with the Nintendo Switch 2, it's because of its weight, it is a lot heftier to hold in one hand. Now if you have small hands, then you may struggle to hold it, but it's not been to the point where it's very uncomfortable to hold. But if you have large hands, you're more than likely going to feel a little bit more comfortable holding it in handheld and, you know, playing it like this. Whereas when I first got it, it was quite hard to get used to the weight of it and the size of it, because of obviously going from a Nintendo Switch 1 and then to a Nintendo Switch 2, there is a big difference in the size and the weight, and it just felt a little bit more heavier, and it did hurt my wrist a little bit. So I was playing in tabletop mode and dock mode a little bit more than I am now. So let's move on to performance of the Nintendo Switch 2, because of course that is the big factor of this new console. I've not found an issue with gameplay or how it runs and how fast it loads. There has been a lot of difference between the 1 and 2. Games such as Animal Crossing do load a little bit faster, not to the point where you're going to be like, oh my god, it's so quick, but it does load a little bit faster than its predecessor. The one thing I have noticed is the battery life. Now the battery life on this console is quite disappointing, to be fair. To say it's a bigger battery and it's supposed to be, you know, a little bit more faster, it does run out relatively quick. So if you are playing like this in handheld mode, it does run out within about an hour and a half ish, or maybe 2 hours. Around about that mark, it does run out quite quickly, and you have to put it then on charge. But obviously if you play in dock mode most of the time, you're not going to have that issue, but if you are playing in handheld mode, it does run out quite quickly. I've also noticed that when you're in dock mode as well, it does get quite hot, which I know that a lot of people have said before, but when you are in dock mode and you are playing, the fans and stuff like that, it's supposed to be cooling, but it gets very, very, very hot. And that is a concern at the same time, because it shouldn't be getting that hot. So yeah, that is one thing that I've noticed while playing in dock mode and handheld mode, is the battery life and the fact that it gets very, very warm. With saying that, when you are charging your console, it has a point where it stops at a certain percentage and it doesn't charge any more than that. Now I have set it on here just so it preserves the battery life. However, you don't have to, you can take it off and you can charge it all the way up to 100%, but I feel like it just makes the longevity of the battery a little bit better, and that's why I've set it. So that is a nice option to put on this one, because on the last console it didn't have that. Also, when it is docked, I feel like it does charge a little bit slower. Now I don't know if it's because it's docked and it's using more power to obviously go on as docked and using it in 4K, and when you're playing it, I'm not sure, or whether it's just something that they've decided to do with it, I don't know. But when it is in handheld mode and obviously you're charging it, I find that it charges a little bit quicker like that. When it's in docked, I find it's a bit slower. But again, it's not really an issue, to be honest, but that's what I've noticed. The one thing I love about having this console is the fact that they've put on board 256GB instead of the original, which was 32GB. Now there is a lot more space, so technically you don't need an SD card, but obviously if you have a lot of games, then you will need an SD card to put inside and obviously store your data on it. But for me personally, I've not used all this all that gigabyte yet, so I found that I haven't really needed to buy another SD card for it. So I'm so glad that Nintendo has finally put on 256 gigabyte instead of the standard 32 gigabyte to store all your games and its data. And I also believe that is one of the reasons why this console price was so high as well, because it's the same as iPhone. If you have a bigger gigabyte in an iPhone, it's more expensive, so why not a console? So I think that's why it was a little bit more expensive, because of the onboard storage as well. Now I know there was a lot of rumours going around that not all the games are compatible, which they aren't, but all the games that I own are fine with it and they run absolutely fine. So I have the likes of Zelda games, obviously they're going to run anyway, Mario games, I have Sims, I have Ring Fit, they all work absolutely fine. So I think it's a very small minority of games that aren't compatible, but most of the big titles and the ones that a lot of people play are the ones that are compatible with it. Now I have found that when I tried to download YouTube on it, it doesn't work. Now why, Nintendo? Why have you not made YouTube compatible with the device? Just one reason why. Why does YouTube not work on this device? Not sure, but that's one thing I was like, why does YouTube not play on this one? Because YouTube is a big thing and you don't have any beef with YouTube as far as I know, so why do you not let it play on here? Who knows, but every other game, everything else works fine. YouTube does not. Don't know why, but there you go. And that also goes with the digital games as well as the cartridge games. Now I have quite a few cartridge games and I thought, oh, is it going to fit, is it going to work? Because I thought how they did the Nintendo DS and then the Nintendo 3DS games, they put a little blip at the side of it so that it wasn't going into the original DS. Now obviously I thought, oh, is this going to happen with the Nintendo Switch 2? And it doesn't. The cartridges work absolutely fine and there's no problem. So for my overall verdict of this console, I have really enjoyed it over the past month. I've really loved Mario Kart World and getting to, you know, play all the different cups in that one and seeing all the different characters that have been added to it and having 25 places instead of 12 places, even though every time I play I seem to want to come all the way down, but that's just the way it is. And I like the fact it has free roam on it as well and you can just explore the world without racing to a point. And I like the fact that all the different characters have different outfits when you get the little lucky bags as you go around, and you can unlock all different outfits of them characters as well. Now obviously they've added more into the game of all the bad guy characters that are in Mario as well, so again a lot more choice to choose from, and I've really enjoyed playing Mario Kart World. However, is it worth the buy as of now if you are not too fussed of Mario Kart World? No, I don't think it's worth it if you are not a Mario Kart stan, or you know, if you're not a Nintendo collector. But if you want to treat yourself, by all means, you know, treat yourself to a little one. But if you are coming from an original OLED and you're thinking, should I get the Nintendo Switch 2? Is there any point? I would say just wait, because Nintendo have not brought out any other games as of yet for the Nintendo Switch 2, so there's no real point unless you really like Mario Kart World. You're not really going to notice that much of a difference with the other games, because obviously they've not been updated that much and they still play well on the previous consoles. But I do believe the Nintendo Switch is more aimed at people who love the cozy games. It's not for people that like, you know, the COD, the GTA, that sort of thing. It's more of the chill sort of games, and if you are a, you know, a Nintendo fan overall, which is the Zelda, the Mario, you know, them sort of games, then I would say yes, you're more than likely going to buy this sort of thing because of them games being on it. Now if you are like a COD player or a GTA or a Fortnite or whatever, they're more than likely better on other platforms such as PC, Xbox, because they have a bit more control over it, whereas this one, it's not really made for that. Hopefully Nintendo do bring out other designs of this console and they have other options in the future, such as, you know, special editions of them, maybe even an OLED screen, which a lot of people obviously wanted to see on the original one, maybe even different colours of the Joy-Cons. But for now, I think that it's not really worth it for people who aren't really bothered about the Nintendo Switch and, you know, just want it because it's there. But if you are, you know, by all means. But for me, I have really enjoyed having this in my collection. I've really enjoyed playing on it, restarting my island, playing Mario Kart World, and just having that new console feel in my collection. So let me know what your thoughts are and whether you have the Nintendo Switch 2 and whether you're going to wait to buy it or whether you've bought it now, and what games are you excited to see being released on the Nintendo Switch 2. Let me know in the comments, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, don't forget to subscribe, and I shall see you in my next one. Bye. And of course, the last difference between the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 is obviously the price. Now, when this was first released, this was actually priced at $279.99. Now, this one, however, was $329 without Mario Kart, and if you bought it with Mario Kart, which obviously I did, it was $429.99. So, depending on whether you get the game or not, is obviously a little bit more expensive. So, there is a big price jump from the original Switch and the Switch 2, but of course there is a little bit more to the Switch 2 than there is in the Switch 1. So that is the comparison between the Switch 1 and the Switch 2. Let me know in the comments which one that you prefer and whether you have the Switch 2 in your hands and have got it from release day, and what you think about it in the comments.